Commander Jake Harrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around Kepler Point Trading Station. The massive structure floated in the void between star systems, a neutral meeting place where dozens of alien species came to buy and sell goods from across the galaxy. Bright lights flickered from shop windows while strange creatures walked through the wide corridors carrying cargo containers and data pads. Lieutenant Amy Stone followed behind him, her hand resting on her sidearm, out of habit rather than fear. Behind her came Sergeant Pete Collins, a veteran soldier whose eyes automatically scanned for threats and escape routes. They were the first official human delegation to visit this part of space, sent by Earth to establish formal trade agreements with the Galactic Commerce Guild. The mission seemed simple enough. Meet with alien merchants, negotiate fair prices for Earth's resources, and open new markets for human goods. Jake had studied the files on dozens of different species they might encounter, learning their customs and basic languages. Everything suggested this would be a routine diplomatic visit, but something felt wrong from the moment they arrived. The busy marketplace that had been filled with chattering voices suddenly grew quiet when the humans appeared. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as alien eyes turned to stare at them. Jake noticed several groups of traders quickly gathering their belongings and heading toward the exit doors. A cluster of insect-like creatures called cricks had been loudly advertising their electronic goods near the main entrance. When they spotted the human delegation approaching, they immediately began packing their wares into metal containers. Their 6 arms moved with frantic speed as they dismantled their display stands and loaded everything onto hover carts. Amy watched one of the Cricks merchants struggle with a heavy box. She stepped forward to offer help, but the alien recoiled as if she had pulled out a weapon. The creature made a series of clicking sounds that her translator device rendered as urgent warnings to its companions. Within minutes, the entire Cricks trading post had vanished, leaving only empty floor space where a thriving business had operated moments before. The same pattern repeated throughout the station. Crystal beings called Vorthak canceled scheduled meetings through their automated systems. Tall, graceful Centauri diplomats who had agreed to preliminary negotiations suddenly discovered urgent business elsewhere. Even the reptilian Sauran traders, known for their aggressive bargaining tactics, seemed to melt away whenever humans came near. Pete Collins had been in enough hostile situations to recognize the signs. This was not normal caution around strangers. This was fear, the kind of deep anxiety that made entire groups of people change their behavior without thinking. He had seen it before in war zones when his unit's reputation preceded their arrival. Amy decided to investigate. She separated from the main group and wandered through the station's secondary corridors, pretending to browse the remaining shops while listening carefully to conversations around her. Her translator struggled with some of the dialects, but certain words kept appearing in multiple languages. Destroyers, war machines, the ones who never surrender. They fight until nothing remains. Endless conflict follows them like shadows. The fragments made no sense to her. Humans had barely begun exploring space beyond their own solar system. Earth had fought no major wars since developing faster-than-light travel. Their military forces were small and designed mainly for planetary defense. Yet these aliens spoke of humans as if they were legendary warriors whose very presence changed the balance of power. In a dimly lit cantina near the station's outer ring, Amy overheard a more detailed conversation between 3 Sauran merchants. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing nervously toward the main corridors where humans might appear. The first Sauran claimed his cousin had witnessed human soldiers in action during a pirate raid near the Outer Rim. According to the story, a single, human transport ship had been attacked by 5 pirate vessels. Instead of surrendering or trying to escape, the humans had somehow destroyed 4 of the attacking ships and captured the 5th. The surviving pirates had been found days later, babbling about humans who fought like demons and showed no mercy to their enemies. The second Sauran added his own tale about a human exploration team that had survived conditions on a hostile world that killed 3 previous alien expeditions. The humans had not only lived through toxic storms and predator attacks, but had thrived in the environment, establishing a permanent research base where others had failed completely. The third story was the most disturbing. a Soran trader, claimed that human negotiators had recently visited a system controlled by the aggressive Hegemony Empire. The meeting was supposed to discuss mining rights, but something had gone wrong. Within a week, 3 Hegemony patrol fleets had simply disappeared. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. The humans had left the system peacefully, but the Hegemony forces were never seen again. Amy realized these stories might be exaggerated or completely false, but the fear in the aliens' voices was real. Something about humans had created a reputation that spread faster than official first contact protocols. Word of their capabilities was traveling through alien trading networks, growing more dramatic with each retelling. She returned to find Jake trying to speak with Veltar, the station administrator. The Centauri was polite but clearly uncomfortable, offering excuses for why so many scheduled meetings had been canceled. His translator kept glitching, making his already nervous speech even harder to follow. Finally, Veltar admitted the truth. Stories about human military prowess had been circulating through the outer territories for months. Tales of impossible victories, tactical brilliance, and a species that treated warfare as both art and science. Many alien civilizations were simply afraid to make formal contact until they better understood what humans were capable of. Jake felt frustrated and confused. Earth's military leaders had specifically chosen him for this mission because of his reputation as a peaceful negotiator. His orders emphasized diplomacy over force, trade over conquest. Yet somehow humanity had already been labeled as dangerous by species they had never even met. The situation grew more complicated when Veltar mentioned something called the Ancient Records. Archaeological discoveries on several worlds had revealed references to a warrior species matching human descriptions. These records were thousands of years old, dating from before Earth had developed spaceflight. The implications were troubling and made no logical sense. As their first day on Kepler Point came to an end, Jake realized their mission had become much more complex than anyone on Earth had anticipated. They were not introducing humanity to the galaxy as hopeful newcomers seeking friendship and trade. Instead, they were confronting a legend that had somehow emerged from humanity's unknown past, a reputation for warfare that preceded their actual arrival on the galactic stage. The whispers in the station's corridors continued through the night, carrying stories of human capabilities that seemed impossible, but were believed by species across dozens of star systems. Jake knew he needed to understand where these legends came from, and why so many different aliens feared the same thing about his people. Something about humanity's true nature was hidden in those whispered warnings, and Jake suspected that uncovering the truth would change everything they thought they knew about their own species. Dr. Lisa Park brushed dust from the ancient stone tablet and felt her heart race with excitement. The symbols carved into the surface were unlike anything she had seen during 3 years of excavating ruins on Terminus 7. This remote planet had been abandoned for thousands of years, left behind by a mysterious civilization that archaeologists simply called the Ancestors. The dig site stretched across several square kilometers of what had once been a massive city. Broken towers reached toward the purple sky like fingers of forgotten gods, while underground chambers revealed libraries, laboratories, and storage facilities filled with strange technology. Lisa had devoted her career to understanding the Ancestors and their sudden disappearance from galactic history. Her small research team worked carefully through each room, documenting artifacts and trying to piece together the daily lives of beings who had vanished long before any current species achieved spaceflight. The work was slow and methodical, requiring patience and attention to detail that most people found boring. Lisa found it thrilling. The breakthrough came when her ground-penetrating radar detected a sealed chamber 30 meters below the main temple complex. The entrance had been deliberately hidden and reinforced with materials that had survived millennia without decay. Whatever the Ancestors had stored there was meant to remain secret for a very long time. It took 2 weeks of careful excavation to reach the chamber without damaging its contents. Lisa descended into darkness with portable lights and recording equipment, expecting to find more examples of ancestor art or religious objects. Instead, she discovered something that challenged everything historians thought they knew about galactic civilization. The chamber contained hundreds of data crystals, arranged in precise patterns around a central viewing device. The crystals glowed with stored energy, somehow maintaining their charge across thousands of years. When Lisa activated the viewing system, holographic displays filled the air with images and text in the ancient ancestor language. She spent days learning to operate the controls and began translating the first few records. The crystals contained historical archives, military reports, and diplomatic communications from the final period of ancestor civilization. But the most shocking discovery was who appeared in those records alongside the ancestors. Humans. Clear images of beings identical to modern Earth humans fighting, planning, and working with ancestor forces during their last Great War. The records showed human soldiers using advanced weapons, human commanders developing battle strategies, and human diplomats negotiating with alien species that no longer existed. Lisa checked and rechecked her translations, convinced she had made an error. The dates in the records placed these events more than 5,000 years in the past, millennia before Earth had developed writing, much less space travel. Yet the humans in the images were clearly modern humans, not primitive ancestors or evolutionary relatives. She sent urgent messages to Earth requesting expert assistance. Captain Ryan Burke arrived 3 weeks later aboard a fast courier ship, bringing with him Dr. Alex Turner, a specialist in ancient languages and xenoarchaeology. The two men were skeptical of Lisa's claims until they saw the evidence for themselves. The data crystals contained thousands of hours of recorded material. Battle reports described human tactical innovations that confused and defeated technologically superior enemies. Diplomatic logs showed human negotiators successfully mediating conflicts between species that had been fighting for generations. Scientific journals documented human researchers making breakthrough discoveries that advanced ancestor technology by decades. Most disturbing were the personal accounts written by ancestor civilians. They described humans as natural warriors, who seemed to understand combat instinctively, as if fighting was built into their genetic code. The records mentioned human soldiers continuing to fight even after suffering wounds that would incapacitate other species, and human units that never retreated, no matter how desperate their situation became. Dr. Turner found references to something called the Great Migration, describing how humans had arrived in ancestor space fleeing some unnamed disaster in their original home system. The record suggested that these ancient humans were refugees who became essential allies in the ancestors' final war against an invasion force known as the Shadow Collective. The Shadow Collective appeared to be a hive mind species that consumed entire civilizations, absorbing their technology and knowledge while destroying their cultures. The war had lasted for centuries, with the combined ancestor-human forces slowly losing ground to an enemy that adapted to every strategy and learned from every defeat. Lisa discovered that the humans of that era had developed something called the Awakening Protocol, a biological modification that enhanced combat abilities during times of extreme stress. The process activated dormant genetic sequences that improved reflexes, tactical thinking, and pain tolerance. According to the records, these modifications could be passed down to human descendants and would reactivate automatically when needed. The implications were staggering. If the records were accurate, modern humanity might be descendants of these ancient human warriors. The genetic modifications that made their ancestors formidable fighters could still be present in human DNA, waiting for the right conditions to activate. This might explain the mysterious reputation humans had developed among current alien species. Captain Burke found technical specifications for human weapons and ships from the ancient period. The designs were remarkably similar to modern Earth military technology, as if human engineers had unconsciously recreated the innovations of their forgotten ancestors. Some of the tactical manuals contained strategies that matched techniques currently taught in Earth military academies. The most chilling discovery came in the final set of records. The combined ancestor-human forces had ultimately succeeded in driving back the Shadow Collective, but at enormous cost. The ancestors' civilization was left in ruins, their population reduced to scattered survivors who abandoned their great cities and faded from history. The humans had suffered similar losses, but the record suggested that some had escaped in colony ships before the final battles. These ships had been sent to remote systems to preserve human culture and genetics away from the war zone. One of the destination systems listed in the evacuation plans matched the location of Earth's solar system. Dr. Turner found evidence that the ancient humans had deliberately hidden their history from their descendants. The colony ships had been equipped with memory suppression technology, designed to help refugees forget the trauma of the war and start fresh on new worlds. Over generations, the descendants would lose all knowledge of their warrior heritage and military capabilities. But the awakening protocol remained in their genes, waiting for the day when humanity would need those abilities again. The record suggested that reaching sufficient technological development would automatically trigger the reactivation process, restoring the combat instincts that had been suppressed for millennia. Lisa realized they were looking at more than historical documents. These were instructions, left by ancient humans who knew their descendants would eventually return to space and encounter the same dangers that had nearly destroyed the previous generation. The whispered legends about human military prowess were not exaggerations or myths, but genetic memories beginning to surface as the awakening protocol activated in modern humans. The three researchers spent weeks analyzing the data crystals, finding new revelations in every file. Maps showed the locations of other human colony worlds that might still exist. Technical manuals described advanced technologies that Earth scientists were only beginning to develop. Most importantly, the records contained detailed information about the Shadow Collective and methods for fighting them. As Lisa prepared her report for Earth, she could not shake the feeling that these discoveries had come at exactly the right time. The galaxy was changing, with new conflicts emerging between species and old alliances breaking apart. If the ancient records were correct, humanity was about to remember its true purpose as the galaxy's protectors against threats too dangerous for other species to face. The ancestors had preserved this knowledge for their human allies, trusting that when the time came, humanity would once again stand ready to defend civilization against the darkness between stars. Lisa just hoped that modern humans would prove worthy of that ancient trust. The attack came without warning, just as Dr. Lisa Park was finishing her morning analysis of the ancient data crystals. Alarms screamed through the research facility, while automated systems announced incoming hostile vessels. Through the reinforced windows of the underground laboratory, she could see bright flashes in the sky as hegemony warships dropped out of hyperspace and began their assault on Terminus 7. General Kate Morrison had been expecting trouble for weeks. Intelligence reports suggested that the hegemony empire was interested in the ancestor ruins, though no one had anticipated such a massive response. Her garrison consisted of only 200 Marines, barely enough to guard the research facility under normal circumstances. Now they faced a full invasion fleet with thousands of enemy soldiers. Sergeant Tony Martinez checked his weapon and looked at his squad of 12 Marines. They had been assigned to protect the archaeological team, a routine duty that mostly involved keeping curious wildlife away from the dig sites. None of them had expected to fight a real battle against one of the galaxy's most aggressive military powers. The hegemony ships began landing troops in the valley below the main research complex. Their forces moved with practiced efficiency, establishing defensive positions and advancing in coordinated formations. These were professional soldiers equipped with the best weapons and armor their empire could provide. They expected to overwhelm the small human garrison within hours. General Morrison gathered her officers in the command bunker deep beneath the facility. The tactical situation was hopeless by any conventional analysis. The hegemony had brought enough firepower to destroy a small city, while the humans had only basic defensive weapons designed to deter pirates and raiders. Surrender seemed like the only logical option. Instead, Morrison began implementing strategies that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her memory. She ordered her Marines to abandon the outer defensive perimeter and fall back into the maze-like tunnels that connected different sections of the ancestor city. The ancient builders had created a complex network of passages, chambers, and hidden routes that would be unfamiliar to the attacking forces. Corporal Nina Ross led her team through tunnels that Dr. Lisa Park had mapped during 3 years of excavation. The narrow passages forced the hegemony soldiers to advance in single file, making them vulnerable to ambush attacks from hidden positions. What had been defensive weaknesses for the humans suddenly became advantages in the underground environment. The first hegemony assault teams entered the tunnel system expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a killing ground where every corner could hide human defenders, and every chamber might be their last. The Marines used the ancient architecture to their advantage, creating crossfire positions that allowed small groups to hold off much larger forces. Tony Martinez discovered something strange happening to his tactical thinking during the first major engagement. Ideas for complex ambush strategies appeared in his mind, as if he had studied them for years, though he had no formal training in tunnel warfare. His squad executed maneuvers with precision that surprised even him, moving through the ruins as if they had fought there countless times before. The hegemony forces found that their standard assault tactics were useless in the confined spaces. Their heavy weapons could not target enemies who disappeared around corners before return fire arrived. Their numerical advantage meant nothing when only a few soldiers at a time could advance through the narrow passages. Worse, the humans seemed to know the tunnel system perfectly, while the hegemony troops had to navigate by crude maps. Dr. Lisa Park experienced the same phenomenon that was affecting the Marines. As she helped evacuate research equipment through the lower tunnels, she found herself automatically choosing routes that would avoid enemy patrols and lead to defensive positions she had never seen before. Knowledge that should have taken years to acquire seemed to flow into her consciousness when she needed it most. Captain Ryan Burke coordinated the defense from a hidden command post in the deepest section of the ruins. His communications equipment allowed him to track enemy movements and direct Marine units to the most effective positions, but his tactical insights went far beyond his formal military training, as if some buried part of his mind understood exactly how to fight this kind of battle. The siege stretched into its second week with the hegemony making virtually no progress. Their commander had expected to secure the ruins within days, but human resistance had turned every meter of advance into a costly struggle. Supply lines were constantly under attack by small groups of Marines who seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish before reinforcements could respond. General Morrison realized that something fundamental was changing in her soldiers and civilian personnel. They were fighting with abilities that exceeded their training and experience. Wounded Marines continued to battle with injuries that should have incapacitated them. Scientists with no combat background were making tactical decisions that professional soldiers would respect. Everyone seemed to be accessing knowledge and skills they had never learned. The hegemony brought in specialists trained for urban warfare, but even they struggled against opponents who used the environment like a living weapon. Human defenders converted ancient chambers into fortified positions, used collapsed sections as obstacles, and created hidden supply caches that could support weeks of continued resistance. The ruins became a three-dimensional battlefield where humans held every advantage. Nina Ross led a raid that captured an entire hegemony supply convoy, bringing much-needed ammunition and medical supplies to the defenders. Her team moved through areas of the city that had not been fully explored, navigating by instincts that seemed to come from somewhere other than memory. They struck their targets and withdrew before enemy reinforcements could organize an effective response. By the third week, the hegemony commander was facing questions from his superiors about why a simple archaeological site had become a military disaster. His forces had suffered casualties at rates normally associated with major planetary campaigns, while the humans showed no signs of weakening or surrendering. Intelligence reports suggested the defenders were actually gaining strength as the battle continued. The breakthrough came when Admiral Ben Crawford arrived with a relief fleet from Earth. His ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system and immediately engaged the hegemony vessels in orbit. But Crawford found that the ground battle had already shifted in humanity's favor. The small garrison had not only held their positions, but had actually begun pushing back against the invading forces. Dr. Alex Turner had spent the siege analyzing data from the ancient crystals, looking for clues about what was happening to the human defenders. He discovered references to the awakening protocol mentioned in the historical records, the genetic modifications that enhanced combat abilities during times of extreme stress. The battle for Terminus 7 appeared to be triggering these dormant capabilities in modern humans. When Crawford's reinforcements landed, they found a situation that defied all military logic. A force of 200 Marines and civilian researchers had held off thousands of enemy soldiers for 3 weeks, inflicting casualties while suffering minimal losses themselves. The hegemony troops were demoralized and confused, unable to understand how such a small force had stopped their advance. The final phase of the battle lasted only hours. Caught between the original defenders and Crawford's fresh troops, the remaining hegemony forces found themselves surrounded in the same tunnels where they had expected easy victory. Many chose to surrender rather than continue fighting an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. General Morrison accepted the surrender of the hegemony commander in the same chamber where Dr. Lisa Park had first discovered the ancient data crystals. The irony was not lost on her that humans were once again fighting to protect ancestor knowledge, just as their ancient predecessors had done thousands of years earlier. The defense of Terminus 7 became legend almost immediately. Reports of the battle spread through alien communication networks faster than official military channels could carry them. A small human force had defeated a major hegemony invasion through tactical brilliance and sheer determination. The whispered stories about human military capabilities were no longer just rumors, but documented facts that other species could not ignore. Lisa Park knew that the battle had been more than a military victory. It was proof that the ancient records were accurate and that modern humans carried the same genetic heritage as their warrior ancestors. The awakening protocol was real, and it was activating throughout human space as their species encountered the challenges of galactic civilization. The emergency session of the Stellar Council convened 3 days after news of the Terminus 7 battle reached the galactic capital. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the massive council chamber, their voices filling the space with a babel of languages that translation systems struggled to process simultaneously. The topic of discussion was unprecedented in council history: what to do about the rapidly growing legend of human military supremacy. Ambassador Ellen Hayes sat at the newly installed human delegation table, feeling the weight of countless alien eyes upon her. Earth had been granted observer status in the council only months earlier, with limited voting rights and no permanent representation. Now she found herself at the center of the most heated diplomatic crisis the galaxy had seen in decades. The debate had been raging for hours before Hayes was allowed to speak. The expansionist coalition, led by the aggressive Korthak Empire, argued that humans should be recruited as military allies against their traditional enemies. The reptilian Korthak had been impressed by reports of human tactical innovation and wanted to form joint battle groups for their ongoing territorial disputes. Opposing them was the Containment Bloc, a loose alliance of species that viewed humanity as an existential threat to galactic stability. The crystalline Vorthak provided detailed analysis showing that human population growth and technological advancement could destabilize established trade routes and political boundaries within generations. They proposed strict limits on human expansion and mandatory monitoring of Earth's military development. Between these extremes sat the Neutral Assembly, comprising species that preferred cautious observation over immediate action. The aquatic tidal speakers had compiled reports from dozens of worlds where humans had been spotted, documenting their behavior and capabilities without drawing definitive conclusions about their intentions. Chancellor Zerion of the Centauri Federation, serving as council moderator, struggled to maintain order as accusations and threats flew across the chamber. The delicate balance of galactic politics was shifting as species chose sides based on their assessment of human capabilities and intentions. Ancient alliances were straining under pressure from this new and unpredictable factor. Hayes listened to hours of debate about humanity's future role in the galaxy, while having almost no opportunity to present Earth's perspective. When she finally received speaking privileges, the chamber fell silent with an attention that felt more threatening than welcoming. Every word she spoke would be analyzed by alien intelligence services and used to shape policy decisions affecting billions of lives. She began with diplomatic pleasantries, acknowledging the honor of addressing such a distinguished assembly and expressing Earth's desire for peaceful cooperation with all species. But the council members were not interested in standard diplomatic language. They wanted answers about human military capabilities and intentions that Hayes was not authorized to provide. The Korthak representative interrupted her prepared remarks with direct questions about Earth's military forces. How many ships did humans possess? What were their maximum fleet deployment capabilities? Had Earth developed new weapon technologies based on ancient ancestor knowledge? Hayes found herself deflecting inquiries that touched on classified information while trying to project strength without appearing threatening. Meanwhile, intelligence reports continued arriving from across the galaxy. The wolf-like Fenari had documented a merchant vessel crew fighting off pirate attacks with effectiveness that seemed impossible for civilian traders. The insectoid Crix reported human explorers surviving in environments that had killed trained xenobiological survey teams. Each new account added to the growing mythology surrounding human capabilities. On Earth, Dr. Carl White was leading a classified research project to understand the genetic changes that had manifested during the Terminus 7 battle. His team had collected DNA samples from the defenders and discovered clear evidence of activated genetic sequences that remained dormant in the general human population. The implications were staggering and potentially dangerous if they fell into alien hands. The genetic modifications appeared to be triggered by extreme stress combined with specific environmental factors. Combat situations, life or death scenarios, and protective instincts toward fellow humans seemed to activate dormant capabilities that enhanced reflexes, tactical thinking, and physical endurance. Dr. White's preliminary findings suggested that these modifications could spread through human populations as more individuals encountered triggering conditions. Colonel Mary Lewis supervised the military analysis of the genetic research. Her classified reports to Earth Command outlined the potential advantages and risks of humanity's emerging capabilities. While the enhanced abilities provided significant tactical advantages, they also created the exact reputation for military prowess that was causing diplomatic problems throughout the galaxy. The situation grew more complex when several species began approaching Earth through unofficial channels. The Peaceful Harmony Collective wanted to discuss mutual defense agreements, concerned about aggressive neighbors who might threaten their trade-focused civilization. The nomadic Star Wanderers offered to share star charts and navigation data in exchange for human protection during their long migrations between systems. Other approaches were less welcome. The militant Steel Brotherhood proposed joint military operations against common enemies, while the predatory shadow markets wanted to hire human soldiers as mercenaries for conflicts in the Outer Rim territories. Earth found itself being courted by species with agendas that ranged from defensive cooperation to outright conquest. Back in the council chamber, the debate was becoming increasingly heated. The hegemony representative, still humiliated by their defeat at Terminus 7, argued that humans represented a clear threat to established galactic order and should be subjected to immediate containment measures. Their proposal included military monitoring, technology restrictions, and limits on human expansion beyond their home system. The proposal sparked outrage from species that had already begun forming positive relationships with humanity. The merchant-oriented Traders Guild pointed out that humans had proven to be reliable trading partners who honored their agreements and paid fair prices for goods and services. The scientific community noted that human researchers had made valuable contributions to archaeological and xenobiological studies. Chancellor Zerion called for a recess when arguments between different factions began approaching the level of formal challenges. The council had procedures for resolving disputes through combat trials, but no one wanted to see the chamber erupt into violence over the human question. The stakes were too high, and the consequences too unpredictable. During the break, Hayes received urgent communications from Earth Command, providing her with new intelligence about developing situations throughout human space. Reports were arriving of human civilians displaying enhanced capabilities during emergency situations, from rescue operations on mining colonies to defensive actions against raiders attacking merchant convoys. The genetic awakening that had begun at Terminus 7 was spreading throughout human populations. The most disturbing reports came from the Outer Rim, where human exploration teams had encountered evidence of ancient battlefields and destroyed civilizations. Archaeological surveys suggested that massive conflicts had occurred throughout the galaxy in the distant past, leaving behind ruins and artifacts that matched descriptions from the ancestor records. Something had once threatened all galactic civilization, and the evidence suggested it might return. When the council session resumed, Hayes made an unprecedented decision. She requested permission to share classified information about the ancient records discovered on Terminus 7, despite having no authorization from Earth Command. The intelligence was too important to keep secret if it could help the galaxy prepare for potential threats. Her revelation about humanity's connection to the ancient warrior species that had once defended the ancestors sent shockwaves through the council chamber. Species that had been debating containment measures suddenly faced the possibility that humans were not conquerors, but protectors whose awakening abilities were a response to some approaching danger. The debate shifted from how to control humanity to how to work with them. If the ancient records were accurate, the galaxy might need humanity's warrior heritage to survive whatever had destroyed previous civilizations. The whispered legends about human military capabilities took on new meaning as evidence of genetic programming designed to activate when civilizations faced existential threats. Chancellor Zerion announced that the Council would establish a special committee to investigate the ancient records and assess their implications for galactic security. Representatives from multiple species would work with human researchers to verify the historical claims and determine what threats might still exist in the dark spaces between systems. As the session concluded, Hayes realized that humanity had crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. They were no longer newcomers seeking acceptance into galactic civilization, but recognized inheritors of an ancient responsibility to protect all species against dangers too terrible for ordinary minds to imagine. The first system died in silence. Long-range sensors detected the collapse of the Kepler 442 system's star, but no distress signals preceded the catastrophe. One moment, the system hosted 3 inhabited worlds, with a combined population of 2 billion beings from various species. The next moment, only empty space remained where a thriving civilization had existed for thousands of years. Admiral Susan Clark studied the sensor readings from her flagship, while trying to understand what could have caused such complete destruction. The star had not gone supernova or collapsed into a black hole. Something had simply drained it of energy, leaving behind a cold, dead husk that provided no light or heat to the surrounding planets. The planets themselves had vanished entirely, as if they had never existed. Within hours of the first report, 2 more systems suffered identical fates. The Rigel 7 cluster disappeared without trace, followed by the industrial worlds of the Fortuna system. Each time, long-range instruments recorded the same pattern of energy drain and complete matter dissolution. Whatever was causing the destruction moved between systems faster than any known technology could travel. Captain Greg Foster commanded the reconnaissance vessel that made first contact with the enemy. His ship had been investigating the remains of the Kepler 442 system when massive objects began emerging from what appeared to be empty space. The vessels were unlike anything in current galactic databases, constructed from materials that seemed to absorb light and sensor beams. The ships revealed themselves to be part of a vast swarm that filled the space between systems. Individual vessels ranged from fighter-sized craft to massive constructs larger than space stations. They moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single intelligence that commanded millions of units simultaneously. No attempts at communication received responses, and energy signatures suggested technology far beyond current galactic capabilities. Foster's reconnaissance team barely escaped when the swarm detected their presence. The enemy vessels pursued them across 3 systems before breaking off their attack, apparently losing interest when the human ship left their operational area. Foster's sensor logs provided the first clear images of what the Stellar Council would soon designate as the Void Swarm. Emergency sessions of the Stellar Council produced panic rather than solutions. The enemy's technology was so far advanced that conventional military responses seemed futile. Entire fleets disappeared when they attempted to engage the Void Swarm directly. The few survivors reported weapons that could drain energy from Starship, reactors and defensive systems that adapted to any attack within seconds. The swarm's advance followed a pattern that suggested they were not randomly destroying systems, but specifically targeting worlds with high populations and advanced technology. Their attacks consumed everything: ships, planets, stars, even the space stations and orbital platforms that represented centuries of construction and development. Nothing remained behind except empty void. Dr. Lisa Park worked desperately to extract relevant information from the ancient ancestor records. The data crystals contained references to a similar enemy that had attacked galactic civilization in the distant past. The descriptions matched the Void Swarm's behavior and technology, suggesting that the same threat had returned after thousands of years in hibernation or exile. The ancient records provided tactical information about fighting the swarm, but the strategies required capabilities that no current species possessed. The ancestors and their human allies had eventually won their war, but only after developing weapons and techniques that pushed the boundaries of physics and biology. Most importantly, victory had required the complete activation of human genetic modifications that enhanced combat abilities far beyond normal biological limits. As the crisis deepened, reports began arriving of humans throughout the galaxy, experiencing spontaneous activation of dormant genetic sequences. Civilian pilots found themselves capable of maneuvers that should have been impossible. Human engineers developed technical solutions that exceeded their training and education. Most dramatically, human military personnel were demonstrating tactical brilliance and combat effectiveness that amazed their alien colleagues. Commander Tina Lopez led a mixed human-alien task force in the first successful engagement against Void Swarm scouts. Her battle plan combined human tactical innovations with alien technology in ways that no previous commander had attempted. The result was a victory that proved the enemy could be defeated, though at enormous cost in ships and personnel. The success at Lopez's battle provided hope, but also revealed the scope of the challenge. The task force had destroyed 12 enemy vessels while losing 37 ships and over 2,000 crew members. Extrapolating those casualty rates to the size of the full Void Swarm suggested that conventional military responses would result in the complete destruction of galactic civilization before achieving victory. Earth's classified research programs accelerated as Dr. Carl White and Colonel Mary Lewis worked to understand and enhance the genetic awakening occurring in human populations. Their studies revealed that the modifications were not random mutations, but carefully designed enhancements that activated in response to specific threats. The human nervous system was being rewired to process tactical information faster, while muscle fibers and bone density increased to support enhanced physical performance. Most significantly, the genetic changes appeared to be contagious in the sense that activated humans could trigger awakening in others through close contact during high-stress situations. Combat units with experienced human personnel began showing improved performance across all species, as if the human enhancement somehow extended to their alien colleagues. Admiral Clark found herself commanding the largest military force in galactic history as species put aside their traditional conflicts to face the common threat. Her strategic innovations combined human tactical thinking with the specialized capabilities of dozens of different alien military traditions. The resulting hybrid doctrines proved more effective against the Void Swarm than anything individual species had developed. The turning point came when pilot Chris Anderson and engineer Beth Harper, both civilian volunteers with no formal military training, successfully infiltrated a Void Swarm command vessel. Their mission should have been impossible for anyone without years of specialized training, but their activated genetic modifications allowed them to adapt to challenges that would have stopped professional soldiers. Inside the command vessel, they discovered the truth about the Void Swarm's nature and origins. The enemy was indeed the same species that had attacked galactic civilization in ancient times. They were not invaders from another galaxy, but survivors from a previous cycle of galactic evolution. Their technology was based on consuming and recycling matter and energy from entire star systems, using the harvested resources to fuel their expansion into new regions. Most importantly, Harper accessed the swarm's genetic databases and discovered that they had been specifically engineered to combat human warrior capabilities. The swarm's rapid adaptation to weapons and tactics was designed to counter the same genetic modifications that were now awakening in modern humans. The ancient war had not ended with victory for either side, but with a stalemate that had forced both species into dormancy. The Void Swarm had awakened because they detected the reactivation of human genetic modifications throughout the galaxy. Their hibernation systems were programmed to respond to the specific neural and biochemical signatures that indicated human warrior genetics were becoming active again. From their perspective, they were resuming a war that had been temporarily paused rather than starting a new conflict. Anderson and Harper's intelligence revealed the location of the swarm's primary control nodes, massive structures hidden in the dark matter between galaxies. Destroying these nodes would disrupt the hive mind that coordinated the swarm's activities, but reaching them would require navigating through the heart of enemy-controlled space while fighting millions of defensive units. The final battle required every activated human in the galaxy working in perfect coordination with alien allies who had learned to fight alongside humanity's awakened warriors. Admiral Clark's strategy combined direct assault on the control nodes with simultaneous attacks on swarm vessels throughout dozens of systems. The plan was impossibly complex and relied on split-second timing across interstellar distances. The humans leading the assault experienced full genetic activation as they approached the control nodes. Their tactical awareness expanded to encompass entire battlefields while their reaction times accelerated beyond the limits of normal biology. They fought with abilities that seemed almost supernatural to their alien colleagues, but were actually the full expression of genetic programming designed for exactly this type of conflict. When the control nodes fell, the effect on the Void Swarm was immediate and total. Millions of vessels simply stopped functioning as their controlling intelligence collapsed. The survivors retreated into dark space, their hibernation systems activating again as they sensed that human warrior capabilities had once again reached the level necessary to defeat them.